Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's episode of Alchemizing HR, Navigating What's Next. I'm Clarissa Peterson. I'll be your host for today's session. But before we kick off our session, I'd like to take a moment to shine a spotlight on our new Alchemizing HR sponsor, Ethico. Ethico champions in empowering the ethics and compliance in HR industries for over 25 years. With their people-focused governance, risk, and compliance solutions, Ethico transforms the conventional product-focused landscape by providing time-saving automation and solutions tailored specifically to HR practitioners like all of us. This approach delivers greater clarity to ensure workplace safety, making Ethico a true partner in elevating compliance and ethics. For those looking to empower their teams and safeguard their people, Ethico stands by ready to help. So let's now dive into today's session. Our topic, Employer of Record versus Legal Entity Decision Tree Workshop. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items I'll go through later, but you may be, who's Clarissa? So let me introduce myself. I'm a former Chief HR and Ethics Officer, and I've had the privilege of working on every continent with the exception of Antarctica. Never say never. I may make it there one day. I'm also the proud holder of the GPHR, the SPHR, and the leading professional in ethics and compliance certifications, and a former chair of the board of directors of HRCI. Today, I'm president and CEO and an executive coach at Ohana HR. Our firm helps transform organizations and their leaders one person at a time. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, we know you get up early and stay up late to learn with us here at HRCI, and for that, we are so grateful. Go ahead and put your location in the chat so I can share that with all of our speakers a little later on. Finally, Alchemizing HR, it's important to us that this series be accessible to all. So if you require our closed captioning service, you'll see that listed below. If you don't need it, just click on the Show Captions button for additional instructions as to how to disable that. So now to start introducing our wonderful speakers. Chris Danks is the CEO and founder of the Leadership Collective with 20 years experience helping organizations, including Verizon Business, Vodafone, Honeywell, and tech startups expand globally. Chris's expertise lies in talent attraction, management, and navigating the complexities of international business expansion. So without further delay, it gives me great pleasure to introduce or reintroduce to you, Chris Danks. Chris, take it away.
Thanks again for the introduction, Clarissa. So hello and welcome to everyone from a very sunny Innsbruck in Austria here today. So as Clarissa said, my name is Chris Danks and I'm the founder of the Leadership Collective. And I'm very excited to be talking to you on our third webinar with HRCI. So our goal as a strategic HRCI partner is to provide regular content and insights on some of the most pressing issues that you as HR professionals and HR certification holders have, whilst enabling you to gain the relevant credits at the same time. So our aim is to be the primary resource for you to call upon as HR professionals to support and help you through break through barriers preventing you from realizing your goals on a day-to-day basis. We're a community of HR professionals and leaders, and our community offers you 4 ways in which we can help. One is the peer-to-peer events, just like this one. We have a WhatsApp and a Slack channel to aid collaboration, which will be in the resources tab later. We also offer a variety of content on a wide range of issues to help solve your HR-related problems and challenges on a daily basis. And we provide advisory services to support you in addition, and have a global recruitment function that enables us to recruit in 66 countries, from Mexico to China to Germany and many, many other places across lots of different industries, delivered by in-country recruitment experts. So that's just a little bit about us and what we do in our role to support the HR community. So let me tell you a little bit about today's event. So firstly, we will look at an employer of record and what an employer of record actually is, and the reasons organizations choose to work with EOR companies. We will also look at how EORs can help you flex and scale your business effectively across borders, and share insights into how to qualify and select your EOR partner in an increasingly growing industry. So we'll look at things like governance, risk and compliance considerations and best practices. And our roundtable attendees and experts will provide some insights on things like cost analysis. We at the Leadership Collective here are very involved with the EOR world, and our experts ourselves in helping guide individuals and organizations to see if it's the right solution for them, and if so, who they may want to consider based on their own needs. So it's something we can help with too. And if you have any questions around that, feel free to drop me an email also. So we also have partnered with the IEC group to provide you with a free in-depth report on EOR solutions. So the QR code should pop up on the screen in a second. This report offers a deep dive into the EOR world. It also looks at various EOR providers and offers a dynamic map or quadrant to help you decide which EORs you may wish to consider as well. So it's quite informative. So just before we get into the panel discussion, we only have one poll today to allow plenty of time for our guests to offer insights from around the table. So the question that we'd like to know is, what level of experience do you have with an EOR solution yourself? So there's four answers here. One is that you don't know what an EOR is and you're completely new to it. The second is maybe you've heard of EOR but never used it. The third being you've just started to use or in the early days of working with an EOR solution. And I'm sure many of you will have had vast experience with an EOR model before as well. So just whilst we're waiting for the results, to give you an idea of the scale of the EOR market and how widespread the usage is becoming, in 2022, the market globally was worth around about $4 billion US. In 2024, that's risen to around 6 billion, and it's expected to double again in size by 2030 to about $12 billion industry. So it's really, really not going anywhere. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on. So just wait for the results to come in. So nearly 60% of you don't have any knowledge of an EOR, which is in a way good because we're going to go through that with you. I see only 6% of you have vast experience, and only some of you have actually worked with an EOR solution. So I'm sure there'll be plenty to learn from everyone here on the panel. So let me first of all get into the roundtable itself, and be great if we could make some introductions. So let's start with you, Becky Ospina. Becky, would you mind introducing yourself, please, briefly?
Great. Thank you, Chris. My name is Becky Ospina. I am the Vice President of People and Culture. I have about 25 years of human resources experience, both global and domestic here in the US. I'm US based. I've worked for small companies, large companies, everything in between in a variety of industries. I have a passion for people. I believe people are at the center of the employment experience, which may not always be intuitive. I have a deep interest in understanding and connecting with and positively impacting people around me. For those familiar with Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius, I'm an insightful collaborator. And I find great fulfillment in making meaningful connections and contributing to the well-being of the employees that I work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Good to see you again. And Tash, would you mind introducing yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you. My name's Natasha DeMello, and I'm the People Operations Manager at TaskRabbit, based in London. Hopefully some of you have heard of TaskRabbit on the call.
Thank you. Perfect. And let's go now over to Debbie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Joseph. I am an HR manager in York, Pennsylvania, for a bioanalytics software company that creates the platform for bioanalytics. And I've been in people management, kind of like what Becky was saying. I have a passion for people in I've started out in the banking industry for 35 years, managing people in the customer service end of the banking world. And now I am in strictly just HR. So it's been about 4 years now, just as in the HR focus and payroll. So welcome, and I enjoy having this time with you.
Thank you, Debbie. Good to have you here. And Casey.
Hey there, my name's Casey Dudley. I am the Director of People and Culture for Advanced Clinical. We're a clinical research and strategic resourcing organization, and I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Casey. And last but definitely not least, Kimberly.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Kimberly Ewitz. I'm the Human Resources Manager at WHR Global, and we are a relocation management company, so we specialize in global mobility.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for all the introductions and for all taking the time out here today. So just to kick off, talking about employer of records in a bit more detail. So for those of you who are not familiar with what an EOR, we'll refer to it as EOR solution is, let me give you a very quick definition to kick it off. So an EOR solution enables you to hire permanent employees in countries in which your business has no legal entity or establishment. So that's what I would say is a quick definition. Becky, would you mind just kicking us off and elaborate briefly on your experience that you have with EOR versus legal entity solutions and the reasons in which businesses look to leverage EOR in general?
Sure. So the number one reason in my experience for utilizing an EOR solution is really quick expansion, rapid growth, perhaps where your organization does not have a geographical presence. It's definitely simplified business expansion. I think it's great for sales, account management roles, customer relationship type roles where you want presence in local markets where that could be spread out geographically. It definitely allows an organization to offer a competitive compensation and benefit package locally, because the question comes up, why not hire a consultant? Depending on the country, that benefits package may not be competitive to attract the right talent. The other thing is you have access to a variety of local expertise. So you have legal and tax and payroll, pension, benefits. Perhaps there's unionized considerations depending on the country. And an EOR can provide all of that expertise to you really at your fingertips. I have worked both with legal entities set up in EOR, and certainly the legal entity avenue is more of a long-term, larger strategy. It's a slower process and requires quite a bit more investment. So depending on the avenue your company is looking to take, an EOR can be a great option.
Thank you, Becky. I know you've got a lot of experience with EOR yourself, and well, both and going down the legal entity route. So I'd love to hear more as well as we go through this. Just to, we're going to pass it around now and talk about some different areas. So Tash, let's talk more or specifically about the scalability and flexibility of an EOR solution versus, say, the long-term commitments and regulatory obligations associated with establishing a legal entity. So in your experience, what factors have influenced the decision to use an EOR versus the more kind of traditional route of a legal entity? And can you maybe touch on, you know, the speed and how fast you can implement an EOR and scale your EOR workforce, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, as Becky said, you know, establishing a legal entity takes time, it's time consuming, it can be costly initially, and also it's really supporting large scale expansion, but for more long-term strategies. So EOR use, we really think about it depending on the type of role and also the volume of hiring. So if you're looking to hire at a really large volume in a specific location, it can be costly in the long run. But for maybe also lower salary positions or more support roles, entry-level roles, it also may not be cost effective. On the flip side of that, though, EOR offers quick setup, so it can often be between 1 to 14 days before you can get someone on board after you've made an offer. So you can really hire someone within days rather than months, and depending on the country that you're utilising the EOR in. So as Becky said as well, compliance and payroll is all taken care of for you. There can be restrictions with implementing like specific company policies, depending on the contract of employment that the EOR is providing. So really, the way that we look at it is depending on the roles that we want to hire, looking for the specific places that we want to do business in as well. And the type of talent that we want to hire really opens up the doors for you to be able to hire talent in different locations outside of your legal entities.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dash. And I know you're a big user of, both models as well. So I'm sure there's plenty of other things that you can add to this. Debbie, just first of all, before I ask you a question, a quick point that people might be interested in. So 51% of all EOR solutions are acquired by US headquartered organizations, and 67%, I should say, of deployment of EOR is across North America and EMEA. So I believe you're relatively new to the world of EOR. So could you just elaborate on your reasons for considering an EOR solution recently and what your experiences have been?
Yes, absolutely. So recently with the company that I'm with them about 18 months now, Sapio Sciences, we became worldwide. We were founded in the United States and then became worldwide the end of 2022. So what happened for us was we were going to onboard outside of the US pretty quickly. We wanted to ramp up. It wasn't a startup, it was a scale up situation for us. And we wanted to ramp up in other countries to get our product out a little further. So the EOR came to mind immediately, that we could quickly ramp up. We could quickly get people through one organization, and we went with one organization that didn't necessarily have EOR entities in each of the other countries we were interested in, but they had a third party that they worked with in each of those countries. We are since trying now to, we are going to move to a different company that has established their own EOR entity in those different countries rather than having a third party. So, but they are quick, and they're all on top of the legalities and the laws that go with each of the countries. So I highly recommend it if you're smaller and you want something done quickly.
Very good, Debbie. Yeah, and it's something that we've spoken to many people about in the early stages, and it kind of leads nicely on to the next question around how you qualify your EOR provider. So just passing over to you, Casey, I know from my own experience that many people that are new to EOR will maybe look at the two obvious factors of things like how much does it cost and what's maybe the service level, for example. But let me ask you, Casey, what framework or criteria have you decided to use before when looking at whether an EOR is the right option or a legal entity in each case, considering the unique goals and priorities of your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're evaluating the need for a legal entity versus utilizing an ERO, we first look at our growth plans for that country. So in the staffing or strategic resourcing world, we often only need 1 or 2 people in a country to meet a client need or demand. So it wouldn't make sense to go through the effort to set up a legal entity and all the costs associated with that. If there is a high need for clinical staff in a region, we may focus our resources on setting up that legal entity. If there is a specific person we want for a role, but there's not a potential for long-term organizational gain, we may look towards an EOR. And so that would be, in the case of right now, we have an amazing person in Malta. There's not a lot of clinical trials happening in Malta, but this individual is an amazing resource and one that we invested in an EOR solution for. When evaluating ERO options, we of course look at cost and customer service. That has to happen, just as you mentioned, but we also look at their years of experience in the region we're looking to hire and the resources they provide for that region. So for example, one of our EORs provide a country annex that has information of high-level overviews of the country's employment laws and cultural norms, so we can kind of get acquainted early on. And that same organization also has dedicated teams for each region who are able to help us with specific questions that might arise. Additionally, it's important to look at the EOR's compliance track record, their industry-specific expertise, and any technology integrations that might be valuable to your organization. So you really want to take a holistic view. Ultimately, we try to stay flexible and nimble. We utilize different EORs based on our current needs, and we focus on compliance, transparency, and the best fit for us at that moment for that role.
Yeah, very good, Casey. And I know on the face of it, many of the demos and so on will look very similar from lots of different EOR providers, but actually there's many, many differences, not just the cost, but many other factors that you've alluded to there as well. And I do think we could talk a lot more about that actually, if we have more time, but I think it's a very important component of how you select your EOR solution. So appreciate the insights. Kimberly, tell us about your experience utilizing EOR solutions. Maybe you could just give us a few insights yourself specifically in relation to governance, risk, and compliance would be an interesting thing to talk about.
Yes, thank you, Chris. There are a lot of things to consider when you look at compliance and determining whether you want to go the legal entity route or setting up an EOR solution. Compliance is a huge factor in determining the appropriate approach. And every country has different employment and taxation legislation, but it actually goes much deeper than the country level. You have to consider the local implications. Things like territories, cantons, and provinces all have additional rules regarding employment law, family leave, safety requirements, compulsory benefits, even environmental and sustainability reporting, as well as just government compliance regarding areas such as training, your organizational officers, your org chart, and even your reporting structure. Some of the additional factors can even be things like HR's proximity to the country, ability to submit for compliance, language restrictions of a region, and ensuring that all the reporting is completed in a timely manner and that all areas are considered. Compliance is also another area that should be considered early on in the process. Areas of consideration even need to be things such as, do you even have a high enough head count to establish compulsory benefits in that area? What's your ability to grow in that region? So it's really necessary to align the strategic goals of the organization along with your compliance needs.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kimberly. Yeah, and I know compliance really is a wide issue and it varies a lot country to country and it's very, very situational as well. So so anyone watching here, feel free to reach out to the panel and myself if you want some more clarity. But it's a very important component of when deciding an EOR, I think. In my experience, EOR solutions range somewhere between $200 and $1,500 a month, US dollars. Depending on location, the provider, service levels, and other factors. So even the price point for the actual service is quite wide. However, interestingly, on average, we've looked at a number of data points, and there's some reports that are suggesting that you could save about 18% in HR administration costs by going down the EOR route when you look at it holistically. So obviously there's many variables, but there's definitely not only some scalability to be discovered through EOR, but also the cost element. So Casey, let me come to you. We're talking about costs. Would you mind sharing some of the kind of hidden costs that you've encountered, both within the EOR side and the legal entity setup side? And how do you assess the overall costs in advance of making a decision?
Yeah, you did a great job at summarizing some of the things that that pop up when you're first looking into EORs. And I'll start with legal entities. One of the most shocking items in regard to costs for legal entities for me is the employer maintenance cost. So setting up a legal entity is already costly, and that's something that organizations anticipate. But the year-to-year maintenance can be even more impactful. So different countries have remittance thresholds that you need to be aware of that may increase your tax liabilities. Add that into the cost of registering an entity, which sometimes requires a physical presence or a country manager that you need to pay. From there, you may need to consult with local counsel or hire employees that are familiar with employment law for that region, such as HR and payroll professionals. You need to ensure you have appropriate payroll mechanisms. So if you don't already have the capability to do in-house payroll, you'll partner with the payroll provider. And then the cost for a legal entity it just can really add up. On the other hand, EORs definitely come at a premium. It's much more of a visible cost upfront, a lot easier to quantify early on. There are some EORs that come at a flat monthly fee or a flat fee per employee. Others charge a percentage of the employee's monthly compensation. They build in those statutory benefits that are required per country that can up the cost if it's a percentage-based fee. And then obviously, if you're hiring several employees in a location, the cost compounds over time if you're using that EOR solution. And it's something you should watch closely to advise your organization if it's the right time to move toward a legal entity at some point. So really, it's something that you want to stay on top of and look at your costs and how they're compounding over time so that you can advise your business leaders on the best time to consider an entry into a legal entity state.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. And I think what's also interesting is that in some countries, a legal entity can take 1 day or 1 hour even to set up, whereas in others it can take several months. So, you can also weigh the differences from a time perspective on how long it, so in the UK, for example, it's, relatively easy to set up a company. Maybe in Germany, it can take much longer in certain cases. So there's definitely lots of nuances depending on which country you go into as well, I think. So just to conclude the session today, Becky, I'd love to pass back to you. So as I mentioned earlier, you've have lots of experience in many countries with both models. So would you be able to just share with us a real world example or story where choosing an EOR over a legal entity provided a beneficial service, and what were the key factors in that decision?
Sure, thanks, Chris. One thing I wanted to mention as the discussion around EORs is we always thought of our employer of record as an extension of our company. And so culture fit, the way that in which they interact with employees and the way they do business was a big factor, as well as certainly the other elements around cost and service. And so when we were looking at our EOR and expanding into Mexico, we had a mix of needs and mix of roles. We're a US-based company, but we have customers all over the world in over 200 countries. And so we were looking for something that was on the same time zone. So our customers certainly could speak the local language. And then certainly there's cultural elements when customers are interacting with employees. And so we were looking to expand into Mexico very, very quickly. We had acquired a large company who wanted local presence on the ground. And that's why we went with the OR model. We were able to secure a vendor and a partnership locally and hire employees within 45 days. And that would be virtually unheard of if you're trying to set up a legal entity. They were able to get the local Mexican employment contract, which has a lot of nuances related to benefits and pay and lots of different line items. We were able to attract top talent. We ended up growing the location to over 30 employees and opening. They were all work from home at first, and then we ended up opening up a small office in Mexico City where our employees could come 2 days a week and work together. And our employer of record actually negotiated the space, helped us find the space, and really were a partner for us. It's been a very successful relationship, and we've been able to really flourish under the model.
Brilliant. No, thanks for the insights there. And Becky, just one follow-on question to that. So is there a time where EOR should be used for a lengthier duration? So I know many people use EOR as a stopgap as well between, using the EOR in the short term whilst their legal entity is being set up. Is there a case, where you've used it longer term for other reasons? Could you expand on that?
Yeah, and actually, for our Mexico expansion, we plan to use the EOR longer term, especially with the size that we are. Certainly, if we grow larger, there does become kind of a marginal cost where you really do need to consider a legal entity and switching over. But it does allow for the flexibility of that expansion and contraction of the workforce, and is our business is very customer driven and customer support with that relational piece. And so we can expand rapidly without the, having to go through a lot of the administration.
Very, very good. No, really, really insightful. Thank you. So yeah, really, I think that's more or less all we have time for today. We wanted to also allow plenty of time for questions, especially as much of the audience hasn't necessarily had much, if any, experience with EORs. So we want to put it out to everyone in a moment. We hope this this roundtable offered you some valuable insights into the world of employer of record, or EOR. If you are considering using an EOR or want more information, remember to download the EOR report that we mentioned at the beginning. There's lots of information on there that will really help you get off the ground. And for those that are a little bit more advanced with EOR, there's also some more in-depth information there for you too. So I definitely say have a look at that. It's a free giveaway to try and help you all in this world of EOR. So you can get, as I mentioned, you can get in touch with any of our panel via the Leadership Collective WhatsApp and Slack groups, which are also in the resources tab. And that's it for today. So I'll hand back over to Clarissa.
Chris and team, thank you so much for your insightful comments. And I'm just so taken back by the incredible amount of talent on this call, the years of experience and real live lived experiences that you've all had. And as I heard your stories, I hearkened back to some of the times I wish I had a resource like this, or colleagues like you that I could have reached out to, but I just had to make it up. So at least now we have a resource that we can all lean into. So thank you for that. As I said earlier, one of the wonderful things about Alchemizing HR every week is we have HR professionals from all over the US and all over the world that connect with us to learn and grow together. So today, in addition to our HR colleagues here in the US, we also have HR colleagues connecting from Nigeria, Ghana, the Netherlands, Jamaica, Kuwait, Mexico, England, India, Rwanda, Brazil, Canada, Iran, Egypt just popped up, and the Bahamas, Cameroon. If I missed your country, please go ahead and put it in the chat so we can share it with everyone on the call. We appreciate you learning with us. So I am going to just randomly ask questions and pick someone on the call. And if someone else wants to jump in to answer, please do so. So Debbie, I'm looking at you. You can't see that, but I'm looking at you. So I'm going to ask you the first question.
Sure.
In Canada, how successful can an EOR sponsor a visa? We have an EOR and they will not support an employee visa application renewal. 3 separate EORs said they can't do it. Help. Is it possible?
I saw that question in the chat, and I am unfamiliar with Canadian processes and abilities. But I saw that somebody answered it in the chat with the name of a company that does. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has a suggestion for that.
Go.
Casey, thanks.
Yeah, so I have some experience working with EORs in Canada. We actually had a United States citizen working in Canada through our EOR solution. I will say that it's important to remember that in Canada, there's very few federal laws that dictate employment. Really, you're going to be focusing on a province by province approach. So you want to find an EOR that has experience in that specific province in which your individual's living in. From there, I would also add that there's a lot of new arising legal compliance around employing through staffing agencies or temporary staffing. And some Canadian governments might see an ERO as providing that service. So it might be your timing that's happening right now, but ultimately, yes, they would have the capability to do that. It's just them weighing if it's something that they are able to do at this time, if it's worth their time and effort right now. I will tell you the person or the organization that we used was a big one, ADP, and one that is always willing to take on a new client.
Excellent, Casey. Thank you so much for answering that. So the next question is, what options exist if a company wants to convert from an EOR to a legal entity in the future and bring on FTEs? Anyone want to hop in on that one?
I know from speaking to, well, if I take Becky's example, Becky, I don't know if you want to talk about your situation, but that's what sprang to mind when, you know, there's been some countries where you've kind of moved people from the EOR solution, you know, either to a different EOR solution or, you know, to legal entity. So is there something you can elaborate on there?
Yes, I will say it definitely depends on the country. So to Casey's point, each country looks at an EOR, staffing, temporary, and outsourcing solutions very, very different from a legal perspective. In some countries, it's much easier than others. So it's hard to provide a global blanket statement. I think with the right partner, you can accomplish the goals that you need.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for reminding us that we need to certainly consider the laws, the labor laws and legislative regulations in each of these countries. This next question is interesting. It's around performance management. How can you performance manage a sales team if they are EOR employees? Can you PIP them a performance improvement plan the same way as another permanent employee? I know there's probably a lot of stories on this call about this topic. Natasha, you have something on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to say that you can obviously manage the employees and performance manage them. Obviously, you need to partner with your EOR, thinking about the local labour laws. The length of time that you might need to have someone on a plan can really vary from country to country or even regionally. So for example, in Germany, when you're looking at maybe absence or performance, you really need to show that you have at least 3 to 6 months, maybe even longer, depending on the circumstance, of like continuous feedback and a record of this information with the employee, whereas other countries, that time period could be much shorter. So I would say partner with your EOR to find out exactly what those time constraints would be, and then to follow your normal company, you know, performance improvement process, unless they advise you otherwise.
And Natasha, just to follow up on that, is that complicated more or different if the country in question has a union, a works council, or something like that?
Yes, it can really complicate things quite a lot if there are works councils involved or unions involved. So that's why it's really super important to do your research of your EOR partner and also the country that you want to go in to really have a good understanding of what you're walking into.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So this person says they're ready to hire an EOR. Will they get a discount if they go for an annual contract? And should they even do that? This is for one individual, and if it works out, they'd want to sponsor them, which this EOR does, to come to the US. Should they do the annual or a month to month? Hey, Kimberly.
I would say the annual probably has a cost benefit there. Generally your month-to-month contracts, you're going to spend a little bit more, especially in that situation. But at the same time, look at the contract and see what the terms are. If they plan to sunset that contract, you're going to want to make sure that that language covers that transitional plan. So just be careful in some of the wordsmithing to sunset that plan when it's time.
Thank you for that. Is there a general number of employees to move from an EOR solution to having a business entity in a country? And we know that there's other considerations other than number of employees, but just focusing on this particular question. Becky?
I think it determines your long-term strategy and the commitment of having a legal entity. Casey went into a lot of the items or costs you don't think about, but having an annual audit. Typically, there's business tax registration considerations, banking, having a bank account locally. Who's managing that? How are you transferring funds? How are you communicating with the local tax and regulatory authorities? So there's a lot underlying that discussion. And in my mind, the long-term strategy and growth plans of the organization are going to determine if that makes sense.
I appreciate your reminding us that the true north on any of these business decisions is the strategy. And Becky, you also made me think about 20 years ago, working in a country where we had no banking relationship and we had to pay employees in cash. And, you know, praying that no one would have the cash taken. And I can't say that never happened, but that's a story for another call. So Debbie, a question for you. Where would someone start to identify potential EOR partners?
You know, I would use something like this kind of forum where you've got other businesses that have used, you know, their services or have experienced people in their company that have used the services. I would always start with recommendations. You can Google and you can questions through any kind of HR group or HR, even, you know, another person that has been in the HR industry for quite some time, and just ask for recommendations. I think that's your best place to start.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. This person says in 2022, they worked from the Dominican Republic and was tasked to recruit the whole staff, reps, managers, supervisors, the whole structure for a call center in Jamaica. It was great and a satisfying project. I met with lawyers, headhunters, and ran the whole project for 3 months and hired about 300 employees. How would an EOR have helped them at that time?
I can probably jump in on this one, actually, Clarissa. I think the main
Great.
thing is time. So, you know, when you've got all these things to set up in a new country, in some cases it might be new offices. In other cases, you know, there's a lot to think about, a lot of legalities and paperwork and so on that all need to kind of align. I think what EOR does is it allows you to ramp up within a few days in most cases. Whereas, you know, as I say, trying to set, even if the country's it is relatively easy to set up a legal entity, it's still, you still have a lot more administration to go through beyond that. So I would say one of the significant benefits is literally being able to turn it on within a few days. I think that's arguably one of the biggest benefits.
Very helpful. So this person wants to know, how do you determine when to use an EOR versus a PEO? So since we're using a lot of acronyms here, why don't we define what an EOR is and what a PEO is, so then we can answer this person's question. So who would like to go for that? So we know the PEO is, oh, Chris, please, you start.
Yeah, so I mean, employer of record is becoming increasingly common now. So there's a lot of similarities, and probably not so much time to go into all the details here. But there is a lot of similarities between PEO and EOR. PEO's been around a lot longer as well, but employer of record is what many people are moving over to now. It's more of a common model compared to the old PEO solution that we're finding. There's a lot of transition.
Okay, can you define or what the PEO is, maybe one of the differences between the two, for those who may not be familiar with it?
Yeah, so my understanding is that on the employer of record side, it's more of an all-encompassing solution that you can ramp up within a few days, whereas PEO is outsourcing different components of the employment, whereas EOR wraps it all under one roof.
Great, thank you for that. And someone says, a related question, could someone talk about perhaps why you chose the EOR route versus a PEO? If you haven't done a PEO, that's fine. But for those of you who perhaps have done one in the past, can you talk a little bit about why you chose the EOR route?
So
I can just quickly, oh, go ahead, Casey.
no, you can go ahead, Becky.
I was just going to say, to Chris's point, it's the all-encompassing one vendor partner for all the solutions, all the needs. And it's also on the employee experience. They're working with one main point of contact as well. We're looking at this from the employer point of view only, but you do have to consider what is the employee experience. I think a lot of folks have touched on that. And I do consider them an extension of the organization. And that's very important when you're looking at a lot of these elements. Are employees having a good experience? Because that will factor into their retention ultimately.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Casey, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, kind of in the same vein of talking about how the EOR is an all-encompassing solution. A PEO could be for several things. So many folks here on the call today that are located in the US might use a PEO to run their benefit function at their organization, or just their payroll function, or for a small organization where all of their employees are located in the US, they might run their time and leave organization processes as well. And so a PEO, you're going to kind of pick and choose the solution that's best for your organization's size and needs, where an EOR is going to do it all for you. And it's a really good place to be if you have no knowledge of the specific country or region that you're moving into, where a PEO is often used when you don't have in-house HR knowledge for your company as a whole.
Yes. And Casey, just remind me, if I work for an EOR, I work for the employer versus if I work for the PEO, I work for the PEO. I'm more loaned labor. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And so it's really important when, and someone got to this with the performance question they had earlier, you want to watch out for co-employment when it comes to EOR, because the employer of record is the employer. They write the paychecks, they own the benefits, they own the tax compliance. The EOR manages all of that for you. In a PEO situation, like Debbie mentioned in the chat, it's a co-employment relationship. You are both held accountable for the compliance, the tax, the employment laws for that individual.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Here's a new acronym. When do you consider EORs versus AORs? Determining whether to hire individuals as freelancers, contractors, or employees. An example, customer support internationally. I've seen a few candidates express the desire to be freelancers in that regard.
Clarissa, yeah, this is something we come up against a lot. So AOR is a relatively new terminology, which is agency of record, which is, in a nutshell, allows you the ability to hire contractors through for the sake of simplicity, through a very similar solution. Basically, there are some technical differences, but a similar solution that enables you to hire contractors, day rate contractors, hourly rate contractors in different.
I see.
So this is something that's relatively new in the scheme of things. I was actually going to mention around this anyway. There are other ways to hire people, such as through the contractor route in different countries. Anyway, whether you use an agency of record or a more traditional recruitment agency to payroll them. So that's a really viable model. In some cases, it's because it's in a niche area and that individual simply doesn't want to go permanent. They may be a contractor. So that's where an employer of record or EOR wouldn't be appropriate, whereas an agency of record would be. There can be many cases where people want to hire contractors. We have a case at the moment, actually, in Mexico, where they're hiring many people, and they're actually looking at that agency of record route, but then turning them permanent in the next few months once their legal entity is set up. So they're actually using the contractor model to then move them to permanent for various reasons that make sense for both the company and the contractor / future employee. So there are other models as well to bring people on. It's not just employer of record, PEO, or through more traditional legal entity setup routes. There's lots of options.
Excellent. Thank you for that. This next question, I'm so interested in the answer because I lived this in a past life. But this one says, many times businesses go into countries with a small or single salesperson. What is your experience with handling sales incentive plans where allowed using an EOR?
I would say I have a lot of experience with that.
I see you shaking your head, Becky. I'm like, I can see she's got some information.
Yeah, it's been fabulous. My experience has been the EOR is a willing partner and they want to help you facilitate the goals. And so sales incentive plans have not been a roadblock. And they actually can provide a lot of advice because incentive plans work differently in different countries. Typically, plans are written from a US mindset and then tried to be applied globally, and that doesn't work. So the EOR can provide that necessary legal outlook to help you craft plans and the language in which both parties are protected. But it
So
hasn't
what
been a challenge
happens
at all.
when, Becky, so what happens in that scenario where that single salesperson becomes 10 salespeople and maybe they're expats from other countries? How do you navigate that? I mean, I know we don't have enough time for that, but is that something the EOR would help with, or is that a partnership between corporate HR and the EOR? Just curious.
From the standpoint of growth around sales and sales organizations, the EOR can definitely be a partner from that perspective. From an expat situation, that is going to be a larger topic because you are going to run into work authorization. And somebody asked about Canada, and Casey was commenting, that is very tricky to navigate. I have experienced that in Europe as well. And the EORs do handle that very individually. So I would vet that out during the selection process if that's something you're interested in, because the work authorization piece has to be resolved before the EOR will take them on as an employee.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Chris, this next question is, where can people get some additional information on this topic or to continue to help them learn and grow in this area?
Sure. So thanks, Chris. Yeah, there's lots of information out there in the public domain, increasing amount now as it's becoming a more popular model. I mentioned our EOR report, or the IEC's EOR report that we presented earlier, so that's worth a look. And I would just really wanted to mention what Debbie said earlier, which is, it's a really good way to talk to others. There are a lot of EORs out there now, an increasing amount every year. Some are excellent, some less so. So I think it is good to get third-party validation. You can also speak to me and others in the team who have, lots of experience in this sector. So there's lots. I think it's one of the most important things is to gain information that we touched on earlier around how to qualify the EOR qualify if you need an EOR in the first place, and that's the best solution. But then go on to actually qualify. You'll have a number of sales calls from different EOR companies, and they may sound fairly similar. So it's really important to have your checklist in front of you about how you actually qualify who's the best fit for your business.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. This question says, do the presenters have experience using EOR services for U.S. employees who move abroad and want to work remotely?
So I can say that our employees know that we have EOR solution. They don't always know what that means, but they know that we have an EOR solution. So they certainly ask. Our company has taken the stance that you have to have the legal right to work in the place that you are going to go work at. And that's to mitigate the risk on our side and the employee side. They need to know the tax laws. They need to avoid dual taxation and many other issues that might pop up when someone wants to go work from another country. And so at this time, we've taken the stance that we don't support opening an EOR for an employee, or opening a relationship with an EOR for an employee who is moving of their own volition. However, if we make the determination that we would like them to go work from another country for a client needs, we would set up that EOR agreement. We would support them in getting the legal support that they needed to get the legal right to work there and make that move. So that was a long answer to say it really depends on your company's strategic goals, if that makes sense. But it's certainly something that's possible. And it really is dependent on the organizational goals and your risk tolerance.
Excellent. We're going to land it here. What an incredibly insightful and energetic conversation. Thank you all so much for sharing your lived experience, your real life perspectives, and your information for all of us. So on behalf of all of my friends and colleagues from all over the world, we are so grateful for you joining us. We hope you'll come back and meet with us again. We always run out of time before we can answer all the questions, but you've given us a great roadmap to help the professionals on this call really understand an EOR and how to integrate it with their strategy, their culture, and their business. So again, our thanks to all of you.